So, hello everyone. Good day, good evening, good morning. I'm really excited to have another session with you regarding our VC and cloud. Zig just remind me that this is our fourth session and it's getting more popular, getting more exciting, a lot of discussions. So today we will be discussing and talking about how to establish and secure connection to public multi-cloud, not a single cloud provider, but multi-cloud. And we are happy to have our friend and colleague Dana today to the panel. So maybe Zig, he was always saying that having three CCDE on the panel would make it great because CCDE is about the mentality, the mindset to be a good architect, finding the right solution. So I'm expecting a lot of great discussions, different point of views. And the good thing, when we were preparing for this session, we said we don't want it to be scripted. We want it to be very real, and we want to have it as interactive as possible. So please ask questions, stop us if you can unmute yourself, or if you prefer, put the question on the chat, and we'll make sure to answer it. Before we start, I want to welcome Zig. Hi, Zig, and hi, Dana. Happy to have you again.
Yeah, hey Mohammed, thanks man, appreciate it. This is our fourth one, like you said, number four, right? We're just hitting these out of the park here. Real quick, couple things, guys. Just me being a stickler. If you're not talking, please go ahead and put yourself on mute. We don't want to have to mute everyone, but we don't want the feedback, right? So I said it a couple times, but just go ahead and mute yourself. If you have a question, feel free to ask. Unmute yourself, ask the question. If you don't feel comfortable asking the questions on the audio, go ahead and ask them in chat. We are watching chat, so we will repeat the question and then answer it for you live. Hey, Mohammed, you're muted if you're talking, buddy.
Yeah. So, brilliant. So, before introduce, let's jump to the agenda. So, as we mentioned today, we'll talk about cloud OnRamp models, how to connect your private cloud to the public cloud. We'll talk about cloud routing, service insertion, traffic engineering, and a lot to discuss. Before we start, Zig, if you can, me and you can just remind everyone about how we reach this stage, our fourth session, how we started and how we reached here.
Yeah, of course. So we've had 3 sessions, right? And they're on all of our YouTube channels, and we'll make sure you guys have all the links to get those. The first session, session 1, was about kind of internet connectivity models, right? Because to get to cloud, we have to have some way to get there. We have to have connectivity to cloud. So we had a quick 30 seconds. We highlighted all kind of the top probably 4 different connectivity models to get to cloud and what you need to care about, right? What's important for you as a network architect and a designer to get your users and your services from on-prem to cloud and vice versa. So that was number 1. Number 2 was DCI. We did a focus session on data center interconnect. So how do you connect 2 data centers together? How do you share information? We always talk about layer 2 spanning, STP, spanning tree, right? Which is horrible, but again, that's what's happened in this world. So we did that. Out of that session, we had a data center interconnect chart that we gave away for free. So Mohammed, do you want to talk about that chart at all?
I believe this chart is, you have to give it a try. It's like a cheat sheet. So we talked about maybe 12 options to interconnect your data center, starting from dark fiber, DWDM, up till virtual and overlay options like VXLAN, AVPN. And Zig and myself, we tried to make it easy for everyone to choose based on business requirement, based on operational requirement. So maybe once when we send you an email after the call, we'll try to make it handy for you. I'll send you a link to download this chart, which I believe is very useful. And the last session, as Zig mentioned, it was how to architect a new trending, cutting edge data center. So if you want to comment here, Zig, about the last session before we have. Yeah.
Yeah, so the last session I think was honestly the best session. We've had the best interaction with everyone on the WebEx or sorry the webinar, and really building out the next generation kind of architectures for data centers and where you need to be successful, what protocols, what technologies, and why. Right? Again, we're going to talk about why we are doing this. It's not just picking a random architecture. There's a reason behind these decisions, right? It's not because I like EIGRP or I like spine leaf architectures, right? There's a direct reason behind everything we're supposed to be doing as designers.
And we are here today. So without further ado, let me kick the session off. So today we have Dana. So Dana, we're happy to have you again. And please, can you quickly in 1 minute introduce yourself, and we start the technical discussion, the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I mean, I'm honored to have a slide dedicated to me. It's not that often. That's pretty cool. So I'm Dana Yanch, and I'm actually a Canadian transplant to the US. I've been in the US for about 13 years. Started my career here when I moved from Canada. And I did a lot of stuff in networking, different stuff for a long time, but eventually I ended up at a company called Viptela that was acquired by Cisco, and that was an SD-WAN organization. And so I worked for Cisco for some time as a global technical solutions architect, focused just on SD-WAN. And I kind of just saw the market going in a different direction around cloud, and I just jumped into cloud, and I moved to a company called Aviatrix. So now you can find me at Aviatrix, and we're a multi-cloud networking platform, enterprise class networking platform. And actually a ton of people from Cisco and Viptela are there, and Juniper and VMware. We have a really amazing group of engineers and architects of this company. So now that's what I do on a daily basis, is architect multi-cloud network connectivity solutions for organizations. And if you guys are interested in Cisco Press books, I have this Cisco Press book that I helped co-author that's coming out. Oh, it actually just released on O'Reilly. You guys can go pick it up now, or if you want the hard copy, at the end of September. And everything, just as a side note, you want to buy it, everything, all the money for that I get is going to go to the American and the Red Cross. So it's a good cause as well. That's it.
Brilliant.
So I'm gonna just chime in, right? Again, we don't have this scripted, but Dana's pretty modest, you guys. So just to be clear, right? Dana is a rock star. He's also another CCDE, multiple CCIE, as you can see on the screen, right? You see the Cisco Press book there. It's an outstanding Cisco Press book. It's one of the top ones, in my opinion, having read it already. And then my last thing is that Dana has presented at Cisco Live a number of times, man. So, you know, he's very modest, but he is a true rock star. And we got him here today to really talk about hybrid cloud and how we can get hybrid cloud to work. So I think we're really lucky. And then before I let Mohamed speak, my last thing is that you have a number of CCDEs here, right? Design experts. So this is a chance for all of you to ask questions. You have a design, you have something that you want us to help you with. Ask the question so we can have a live discussion around it, please. All right?
Sure. I think I can't insist on that. And let's go on to, so today, as we start usually, because we are architects, we are solution designer and consultants. So we'll start with what and why. So from your point of view, what are the business problems we are trying to solve when we decide to put our workload in different clouds, or not using the single cloud provider? So the stage is yours. If anybody wants to comment on, unmute himself or put it on the chat.
Alu has said in a chat availability, so that's a good one.
Good one, yes. Good start.
Right. Yeah. And remember, guys, we're going to ask these questions and we're going to let you guys answer. So feel free to put your comments in chat or unmute yourselves and answer. But everything we do from a design has to tie back to the business, right? What are we trying to do from a business standpoint? So why do we need to go to cloud? We got AF in the chat, different application requirements. I like that. Application requirements, right? We got availability as well from Alu. What do you guys can think, Mohamed and Dana? What do you guys think?
What about visibility as you egress the cloud or you go across cloud? That's probably important too, right?
Visibility, yeah, it's huge. We got Raheel said security. Joel said ability to deploy a prod workload in a few weeks. So time to market, kind of like increase time to market. That's great. And these are business terminologies, guys. Like this isn't technical stuff, right?
Yeah.
Alu said geographical based content. So geo kind of consumable content, right? That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can access it from anywhere. This is a very important point.
Global access, right? We got a zero trust with Cisco infrastructure and heavy Office 365 integration from Ken. So these are all great business problems, right? That cloud could solve for you and for other companies.
Yeah. And for sure, we can add better control, OPEX and CAPEX control. You can يعني, start to transfer the TD and or the repetitive job like patching and this stuff to the cloud and concentrate on your application in your business. So a lot coming from actually migrating to the cloud. Dan, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I would say one thing I run across is deterministic chargeback models for
Yes.
organizations. So it's really easy to, when you're moving to cloud, it's a much nicer architecture for chargeback models.
Yeah. Exactly, 100%.
Yeah, because everything's about cost, right? Everything's about either cost reduction or increased efficiency, increased effectiveness. But those are easy things to say here, right? Because we're not getting into the technical solution.
Yeah.
All right, so this next one, I'll talk to this one, Mohamed, because this is my point, right? As a designer, we should be constantly asking why, right? So if anything else out of today, that is a single most important takeaway. As a designer, you have to ask why. You have to push back. Like you can't be doing something because it's been done for 20 years or 10 years. You have to truly understand why something needs to be done before you make that design decision. And I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, 100%. So let's take some of the business use cases for multi-cloud. I hope we can do it one by one, but we have it all. So let's talk about it. Dan, if you can kick in and start with it.
Yeah, sure. We can definitely talk about some of these. We can go through some of them point by point. Some of them are pretty straightforward, self-explanatory, but I would probably focus on some of the ones that maybe are not as clear. So we all know what the best of breed component is, right? It's just like on-prem world. If you were building your on-prem networking, you're not going to build it all with Cisco or just with Juniper, right? You're going to try to figure out what's the best for your organization, whether it's cost, whether it's supportability or functionality or availability or architectural reasons. You're going to want to pick the best of breed for that particular component of your network, whether it's security or your collab tools or your edge routing, core routing, right? So having optionality is key for an organization. You never want to be put into a corner. And so that's one of the reasons why risk mitigation reduction, we all know what that is. Actually, an interesting one about that happened last week is that you guys all know Zoom, right? The competitor to WebEx. Zoom had this massive outage. And Zoom is actually using two clouds right now for the most part. I won't mention names, but Zoom had a massive outage. And if you took the Zoom outage graphing and the charting and looked at the cloud that they were in, one of the clouds that they were in, it was a like for like mirror of the outage, right? So that was an interesting parallel. And then, having their applications available and access available in another cloud, of course, makes it probably better for them or easier for them to have uptime, right? If you have regions that's down or whatever it might be, you have that application availability elsewhere. That's massive to have that functionality. The optimized performance piece of things. I don't want to take too much of you guys' discussion if you guys want to say something, but I want to mention this one and then one more. I'll let you guys talk about the other ones. But optimized performance, when I'm talking to a lot of my customers, they're finding that. Oh, go back one slide. That's right. Yeah. That's okay. The optimized performance thing is that, the truth is that some different pieces of applications or components of applications work better in certain clouds today. So you might think, database applications component of an application works well in cloud A, but their AI component or I don't know, whatever other component that maybe the front ending component of the application works better in other clouds. Being able to have this separation is a benefit, right? You can have it running the best in the best cloud, best region, optimal performance is what we're talking about there.
So Dana, if I could just add, so I think that's a great point, right? Because that means customers, right? Customers of cloud can kind of pick and choose what capabilities that they want that is better, right? Like if the database is better in one cloud, you said cloud A, which is great. So you got cloud A over here, right? And then maybe analytics, you said like kind of that analytics side of things, right, is better in cloud B. Having a hybrid cloud model allows them to have part of the application in one cloud provider and then the other part in another cloud provider.
Yeah. So just for I was just waiting for the confirmation to management.
Just mute. Carry on, Dana. Okay, go ahead, Nathan.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, the truth is that we, from talking to hundreds of customers, these are some of the reasons. There's actually a good list of them, but these are the ones that float to the top. But what I would say is that most of them on here are technical. Some of them are strategic. But what I'll tell you is that in the end, you can spend as much time as you want trying to figure out what's the best architectural decision or the best technical decision. You can try to argue it might not be a good best practice to have multi-cloud, right? Yeah. This is also arguments. But the truth of the matter is that in the end, what I see the most is actually multi-cloud is a business-led decision. It's like I was on this call with a company called HashiCorp, which is a multi-cloud automation solution, and the speaker there said something. He said, "You don't choose multi-cloud chooses you." I thought that was hilariously true because that's the fact of the matter here, that most of the time the architects are blindsided by multi-cloud requirements because it came down from the business. Maybe they got a new customer and that customer is paying a lot of money to have whatever they want in that company's infrastructure. And so maybe they say, I want you guys to use Azure. I see that a lot, right? It's like, I want you focus, you guys have to put my app in Azure, not your whatever other cloud you were using. And so now they're forced to make that money, to keep that money coming in, to leverage another cloud. And that goes the same way with partners. Maybe they connect with a partner and they have to use a different cloud. Maybe they acquire a company and now that other company is using cloud B, right? And so this leads them to have these requirements for interconnectivity between clouds and cloud architecture, multi-cloud architecture. Right? You can throw everything else at it, cost efficiency, autonomy, all that stuff. But what always drives the decision in the end is the business, because the money is what makes the decision.
100%. I just want to, exactly, Dana. I want to comment that as you mentioned, so maybe cloud is with us for the last 12 years, so some people still a bit cautious to trying to work with a single provider, or what we can call it provider or not vendor. So but for you, in order to get rid of the vendor lock-in or to make sure that business continuity, like the example you mentioned, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. As you mentioned, I like the use case for the best of breed, trying to get the best out of all the available cloud providers. So
yeah, multi-cloud optionality. That's what is kind of becoming the lingo, the term for it. Being able to have whatever you do in the cloud, having multi-cloud optionality is a big piece, a big part of things. Yeah.
Last point, Sandeep mentioned a couple of good points. As example, he mentioned maybe the feature you're looking for is not available in your region. As example, maybe it's not available in the Middle East because something like that. So you're only having maybe AWS in the Gulf or something like that. So just I'm giving a hypothetical example. So let's go to the next slide and talk about.
Guys, I have a question. Sorry to interrupt. It may be my lack of knowledge on why we need the multi-cloud, but then again, don't we have the availability zones and the multi-redundancy so that the services in cloud doesn't go down? Why we need multi-cloud deployment in this case? Just wondering.
Just from an HA perspective, go back one slide. Go back one slide. Yeah, so you're talking about, all clouds, they market that there's HA, multiple availability zones and multiple regions and whatnot, right? That's what you're arguing. So what's the point of having multiple clouds? right? Like we said, it's the HA piece is one thing, right? Hopefully HA works correctly, and that they don't run into a problem, or that was architected correctly for that cloud, so that the HA actually works in the first place, right? That's another thing that's been tested, right? But it's more than that. The HA, yeah, you can argue that, hey, we're good at HA, we don't need multiple clouds, but it's all this other stuff that drives people to multi-cloud. It's not just the technical piece of things. Does that make sense? I'm hoping that, like, for example, Zoom that had an outage, that they architected their application to be multi-AZ, multi-region, but to have, failover and state and whatever it was to make sure it failed over correctly. We don't know, right? We don't know what they did to have that outage. What we do know is it was directly correlated to another cloud provider's outage, like directly. So that's all we can assume right now.
So Ahmad, if I can just add real quick, right? Like, I'll try to use an example, right? So, I mean, we're going to cloud and you have services out in cloud. And I would say that there are a subset of capabilities that every cloud provider is going to provide, right? These capabilities are business capabilities or technical capabilities. So there's going to be a list, like maybe it's 5, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 10. All cloud providers are going to give you those capabilities, right? High availability, redundancy, their services can move from region to region, whatever terminology the cloud provider leverages for their features and their functions. What we're talking about here is a little bit more than that, right? It's not just the common stuff. It's the additional things that each cloud provider provides, their own kind of things, if you will, inside their cloud environment. But then also, you don't want to put everything in one cloud. What happens if there is an outage, like Zoom had, right? Or like other companies have? They have all these regions set up, their applications active, but when a cloud provider has a significant outage, just like a service provider running MPLS has a specific outage, now you're kind of in a situation where your system's going to go down, right? Connectivity to your system or your system goes down. Sorry, go ahead, Mohamed.
That's a good parallel, Zig. That's a good parallel. If you guys have gone and deployed WAN networks and maybe SD-WAN, there's a reason why people do multiple service providers, right? They do like level 3 and AT&T, 2 MPLS. I have a lot of customers doing that. I have a massive amount of customers that did 2 MPLS circuits. They had money, right? Or they were doing MPLS and internet, or 2 different internet service providers. You don't think those internet service providers had HA and multiple availability? And they definitely did, right? It's just the whole point of that matter is that all the eggs in one basket. It's more than just the HA functionality that's being offered by the service provider. It's having service provider level functionality or service provider level HA, if you can think of it like that. Organizations may not have all their faith in one cloud too, but I would say that piece of it, I would say that's still the reason for multi-cloud optionality from an HA perspective. That's like a minute reason. It isn't the big one. It's the other stuff on here, like best of breed and actually business led. I'm keep coming back to the business side of things, is it really ends up being that a lot of the time.
Yeah, maybe you have company A which acquired company B, and company A was already in Azure and company B already on AWS. So for sure you have to try to use the resources in the 2 cloud and allow the connectivity and security between them. So you inherited a multi-cloud environment, even if you don't want it from technical point of view, but it was there because of the business led, as Dana said. Let's to
like the way we used to discuss when you have company acquired by another company, you have one routing protocol running. Now you have to do redistribution. Thank you, guys.
Exactly.
You got it.
Yeah, hopefully it's not that complex. And hopefully it's not another CCD, because I don't know how much of the CCD I remember, honestly. It was like a long time ago, 7 years ago.
Let's talk about the multi-cloud connectivity, and then we'll start with how to connect to a single cloud. Let's warm up. So we may think about the first and most easy option is like VPN. You have here we call it private cloud or data center, or user who wants to connect to the cloud. So easily you can think about cheap solution we can easy to implement, which is VPN. You can start an IPsec tunnel, GRE tunnel, or whatever. So Dig and Dana, let me know if you need to comment or.
Yeah, so I'll just
any point to add, yes.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple things, right? So again, I'll be specific here, right? So this is going to be like your on-prem data center of some sort, you're going to have some sort of VPN connectivity, whatever technology, IPsec, TRE, SSL, VPN, you're going to have some sort of connectivity over your internet links to cloud, right? And that's this cloud model, right? And that's probably what I would just say 5-7 years ago, what most people were doing. Is some sort of IPsec connections to cloud, and the different vendors have different ways of doing it. Some cloud vendors have dual IPsec tunnels, right? But you're still going across the same internet connections that you have going out to the cloud. It's not like you're running a direct connection to the cloud.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that. Oh, sorry. One thing to keep in mind why the VPN component still exists in the real world is because, you're not just on-ramping your own organization in the cloud. If you're an organization that's off as a service provider, I don't mean by as an internet service provider, but an application service provider, and you're onboarding customers into the cloud, IPsec VPNs is the quickest, cheapest way to get people into your cloud and access your environment. So, some of my customers, they have 300, 400, 500 VPNs terminating on different regions in the cloud to get their customers access to their apps. That's another common use case, or it might be partner connectivity. So there's not just your own onboarding of your branches and your data centers into the cloud. It's other stuff too, right? So this is the simplest way to do it.
Cheapest, simplest, quickest.
Yeah. So, but let's think about a designer perspective. So, why do you think this is not the best option? So, what are some of the limitations and drawbacks of choosing this option? We mentioned its benefits. It's cheap, quick, and easy. But what are the drawbacks that maybe you don't need to use this as a strategic on-ramp solution?
Someone's talking. We can't really hear you very
Yeah,
well.
I'm trying to.
So we have someone in the chat. Can't hear him very well.
That's a good argument. That's a good argument.
Yeah, I think there's an argument. You want to mute them?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, sorry, guys. Sorry for that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the issue with having everyone be able to unmute themselves. But I like to have the conversations, right? So we have someone, I think Steven in chat said SLA. SLA is an option, right? Could be a concern, a constraint, right? You don't have a good SLA. I would
just add one thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, it's also, I believe we need to go for zero trust. So with the least privilege, so within IPsec, it's hard to achieve that.
Perfect.
So it's not anymore about only having secure connection. It's about least privilege.
That's great, right? We got QoS as well in chat. No, I love these. These are perfect, right?
What about performance, guys? What happens when you terminate IPsec tunnels? You really today IPsec tunnels. How are they terminated in the cloud usually, or even most vendors today? They're usually tunnel per core, right? And so you end up losing performance, significant performance, right? You get knocked down from whatever your throughput is on the edge to 1, 2, maybe 3 gig. You might be able to do a little bit of ECMP here and there, but you're going to hit a limit in throughput. IPsec.
So I would add this real quick, right? So I would say this. These are some limitations, right, of doing a VPN type of solution. But keep in mind, when you're designing these things, you're going to want a short-term option, which is this, right? This could be your short-term, easy option. Get this up and running relatively quick. Get connectivity to whatever cloud provider, get your workloads in cloud, and then have a longer term option later on where it might be direct connects or whatever else. When we get to you'll see what we're talking about. There's other long-term options, right? So don't think they're going to isolate this and say, well, this isn't never an option, right? This is going to be probably your first option and your short-term option.
100%.
Yeah, I would say there's also one of the benefits. I mean, we talked about a lot about the caveats of this type of model, but there's also a good benefit here in that it's the fact that flexibility around where you can terminate. Really, you can terminate an IPsec VPN anywhere at any time, right? And you can do as many as you want of them, really. So this is a lot. If you compare that against something more like a private connectivity model, a direct connect or express route or whatever it might be, that's not as simple, right? It takes time. It's not available everywhere all the time. So it comes down to a lot of business flexibility here as well. So we still see a ton of customers, like a massive amount of customers that are using IPsec VPN to the cloud. They don't have a lot of the requirements to have direct connection.
Exactly.
I have
So yeah,
IPsec connectivity to cloud providers from my home.
yes.
Just to give you an idea. You can get your own IPsec connections to your cloud providers from your home if you wanted.
What about SSL VPN? I'm curious to hear people saying about cloud-based SSL VPN connectivity. Let's see if we have anybody using that or thinking through that type of model. That's like client VPN I'm talking about here, not.
Maybe it would be maybe indirect. As example, something like if you have a service hosted in AWS like S3 buckets, and then you are accessing it securely. So yeah, somehow it's a VPN, SSL VPN over HTTPS, something like that.
Well, I like the comment that somebody made earlier around zero trust. Zero trust model. What's interesting about SSL VPN connectivity from a user perspective is that you can then implement identity, and you can implement like policy-based enforcement based on the identity of a user and their enforcement or their access to whatever two-factor authentication method they use. So, for example, you could authenticate against AD or Azure two-factor or Azure identity. And that would put you into a certain group that can access only certain things within the cloud. So that's a really nice model from a user access perspective. People are doing that.
Perspective, right? That's awesome.
Sorry, a question here, Dana. Now regarding, because for SSL VPN, but eventually still we need to have a box to terminate all this SSL tunnels.
Yeah.
So now moving to the cloud, so I believe we should think about a cloud-based solution, because we don't need to have any more hardware, especially like for VPN tunnels.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I love that point. And you're right, because if you think about it, oh, sorry, Mohammed. This one I get excited about because I played a lot with that with the company I work for. We have a really nice solution around this that's cloud scale. But I think you're right. I mean, that's one of the big things. We have to think of this from the cloud native perspective and the cloud scale perspective, and stop thinking about hardware. And in the cloud, you want to leverage a termination function or a cloud scale termination aggregation point that's not just a re-platformed piece of hardware. Like, now I'm not going to name names, but if you think of every other SSL VPN vendor out there, majority of them, now that when they're in the cloud, they've just re-platformed their hardware. They're for the cloud. It's not cloud native. It has no cloud intelligence. It's not cloud scale designed, right? So you're right. It's a really good point. If you're going to go down that route, you should be taking a solution that's had cloud scale in mind. It's key. And then your end user is just a piece of software as well. So it's now software to software, and you have a lot more flexibility there.
So we have a couple of comments real quick in chat. Joel said a couple things, so I'm just going to read it. Client-based VPN in the cloud makes a lot of sense as it moved traffic off of corporate internet gateways and VPN concentrators, which started to get really congested when everyone started working from home due to COVID. Cloud-based internet gateways and client VPN services are scalable and elastic to handle the load.
Absolutely, cloud scale. That's the whole point there, right? Absolutely, perfect comment.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. So the second option, as I mentioned, maybe IPsec and VPN is more tactical solution, and if you have maybe very few branches to be connected and simple topology, yes, we can go for it. But more strategic, we are taking the next step. We are talking here about something like direct connect or dedicated line or express route or whatever, based on the cloud service provider, transit gateway, and so on. So if you can give us a hint, Dana, about how this option differs than the previous one.
Yeah, I mean, actually, people have mentioned quite a few of the points here that actually correlate with this. So yeah, we have this other model, CSP or SP provider model, which is more like a privatized connectivity model with an SLA. And so Direct Connect, you guys have heard that, right? This is a kind of a dedicated or pseudo-dedicated connectivity from your prem to the cloud, offered by one of the cloud providers. Direct Connect is an AWS terminology, but every other cloud provider has one. Azure's Express Route and Google is Cloud Interconnect, right? And then you have another model where it can be a hosted connectivity using one of these types of functions through traditional MPLS service provider. So AT&T offers something like NetBond. Right? That's like basically taking your direct connect and having that at one point meet like a meet-me point into your MPLS, so you can have direct MPLS connectivity from your underlay into the cloud. It's a really nice model as well. There's caveats and benefits of that, but it's a nice offer from a service provider.
100%. So as you mentioned, so some of the drawbacks of the IPsec VPN as example, or the VPN as a whole, we are trying to solve with this model. So better quality of service, more control, more deterministic traffic. What else, Zig? What else from your point of view?
Yeah, so those are some of the benefits
Licensing.
that, you
Yeah.
know, some of the benefits, right? I think some of the limitations with the direct connect and express route and cloud interconnect. Probably the cost, right? I mean, an IPsec VPN and whatnot is going to be probably cheaper in most cases. Validate that, right? I could have a preconceived notion on that, but that IPsec is probably going to be a cheaper solution than a direct connect or whatever terminology you want to call here. And then like I mean, Dana already mentioned it, right? Location, it's not always available, right? Like if you're not in a location that has this offering, you are going to be limited to some sort of VPN connection.
Yes. Or or maybe you are rich, so you'll spend a lot of money on something like international lease line or something, IEL, or to connect to Azure in a different country. So not everybody can pay the bill for this link. Yeah.
Some of the benefits, right? It's your pretty much kind of like a logical your own line, right? It's your link. It's probably a little bit more guaranteed from a quality of service perspective than the internet, right? Again, VPN connections are going over the internet, your internet or MPLS links out to the cloud. So something like this would have more of a quality of service, quality of experience for your users and applications. Bandwidth concerns, you might have some dedicated bandwidth, right? That's the next one, right?
That's
You
the
can get
main.
1 gig and 10
That's
gig.
the main one I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the main one I see, Zig, is people moving from traditional IPsec connectivity to one of these not lease lines, but one of these like more privatized, dedicated connections. Is that you get dedicated throughput and guaranteed throughput for the most part.
Exactly.
There's always what they say and what you get, but the truth is that you're going to get a lot more throughput and consistent throughput than you would on an IPsec connection. 10 gig and beyond. They're moving beyond 10 gig now on these privatized connections.
But there's a cost, right? So you just got to keep that in mind. There's going to be a cost to all of this, right? And so from a business standpoint, you have to sell that justification to your business leaders.
Yeah, you have to calculate the business case and decide you go option A or option B. Here in the comments, AF mentioned it's a bit secure, which we agree. And also Amon mentioned that you can save some of the licensing cost if you go, for example, some SSL VPN or whatever VPN concentrator, limited number of VIF. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about one thing that's starting to come up with some customers? Well, it's been coming up for years, but while these are they're privatized, but you might be putting your own like virtual line, right? And maybe your own VLAN or you have .1Q handoff, whatever it might be. A lot of organizations still have requirement to control their own encryption for traffic and flight, and you don't get that here, right? It might be on the service provider side, maybe there's MACsec happening at one point, for example. But really, for the organization to have control of their IPsec or their encryption mechanism across all their lines for data and flight, they don't have that visibility, and so that's a drawback. However, there are solutions for that, right? So just want you to bring that one up.
Let's say overlays, right? Some sort of overlay.
Yeah, exactly.
Overlays, exactly. Overlays on top of that. That's becoming more and more prevalent now.
So yeah, let's move to a third option also. So maybe, as I mentioned, you can go to something like colocation. If you can, as Dana mentioned, like Meet Me, you can go maybe to Equinox or Megaport or whatever. Or some people here, maybe you can spend more time talking about SD-WAN.
Right into the overlay conversation, right?
Yeah.
Overlay conversation, teeing it right up, right?
Yeah.
So the colocation, I'll just jump in, Mohamed. Sorry for cutting you off.
It's okay.
So I have experience with using colocations in the past, specifically in Boston, Massachusetts, in the U.S., and it's great. I mean, you can literally connect to a whole bunch of cloud providers at the same time in the same room, and then you pretty much just connect your environment right into them, right? And then you have all of them together. Um, it's a great opportunity to be able to do that. Now that's location specific, right? You're not going to have that everywhere. You're just not.
Yeah.
So,
So
go ahead.
no, thank you, Zig. I was going to mention, what if our customer already maybe invested some money to build his own SD-WAN solution, connecting all his site to the his data center, as example, or her data center and headquarter. So then we want to connect them to the internet. How is there an option to save his investment and not to ask him to remove everything and connect to the cloud differently? What do you think, Dana and Zig?
Yeah, I can talk to that. But right before I talk about that, I wanted to mention something about the colocation piece of things. So colocation, one issue is that it's super expensive. It can be super expensive, so keep that in mind, right? However, you get super flexibility. That you can allocate or set up a direct connect or an express route in minutes, because these are all pre-built connectivity models that all they're going to do is just patch over you a virtual, like a virtual trunk or whatever it is, a virtual line to your side of things. So they already exist. They just got to provision it for you. You can get this connectivity like crazy, like really quick. It's awesome. So that's one reason why I have our customers there. You like using Equinix pure port, megaport type functionality, mainly like pure port, megaport. I see a lot of that for instant connectivity model. Around SD-WAN, yeah, that's a really good point. Like, at this point, SD-WAN, we're like 6 years, almost 7 years into SD-WAN at this point. Believe it or not, can you believe that this is something that started 6 years ago? And even back then, we were having conversations around, is SD-WAN even going to be a thing? Like, is it worth our time? Is it going to be now it's like this multi-billion-dollar organization. Was it a good idea? Who knows? That doesn't matter. What happens is that's the way the industry went, and that's the trending. So now we deal with it, right? But it's the same thing for any technology. It's sometimes not about the technology itself and the architectural best practices and whatnot. It's more about industry trends. So SD-WAN is definitely one industry trend that exploded, and people, if they haven't deployed SD-WAN, if they've already deployed SD-WAN, a lot of them are already actually onto their SD-WAN 2.0 deployments, so their next version of SD-WAN, their next solution, or maybe an upgrade. So SD-WAN is definitely, a ton of people have invested in it, and you can bet your bottom dollar that the SD-WAN service providers or the SD-WAN providers like Cisco and Versa and VeloCloud, all these guys have thought through cloud on-ramp models, because that's a piece of the business they don't want to lose, right? And so definitely, if whatever SD-WAN that you're deploying, you should look into what cloud on-ramp models they support, right? There's different models, right? There's models where they can place their virtual appliances in the cloud and you terminate there. Or there's models where each branch connects to the cloud natively. Like, there's all sorts of different ways that it's being done, and there's benefits and private. That's actually a whole session in itself on that connectivity model. But it's something really to consider, because imagine the benefits you get with SD-WAN now. Now you can leverage all the advanced traffic engineering and the application manipulation of traffic engineering through application metrics, right? You get like maybe you get some session correction, right? You might get like forward error correction and packet duplication and a lot of visibility into the cloud, right? So there's a lot of people going down this path. And I actually see people replacing direct connects and the private side connectivity with SD-WAN ingress connectivity models, because they can get very good throughput, super good security and service insertion. You get all sorts of stuff with SD-WAN as an ingress model into the cloud. Sorry, that was long-winded, but that one I get excited about because it's my background.
So you're good, Dana. That's great. I'm gonna just jump in here. I'm gonna ask everyone that's on the webinar, if you guys could just put in chat if you're using SD-WAN today. I don't know if we don't need to know the vendor, but if you could just say you're using SD-WAN, could you just say you are in chat? I'd like to know how many people today are using SD-WAN on the webinar. And then my following question to Dana, you mentioned throwing out, some sort of SD-WAN kind of endpoint or solution in the cloud and multi-cloud and whatnot. Can you maintain segmentation from like on-prem to the hybrid cloud that way?
Oh, awesome question. This is like my domain because I'm working with a lot of customers on this. They're starting to realize that when they ingress natively into the cloud, like what I mean by natively is that they're landing their SD-WAN terminations in the cloud. The truth of the matter is that you lose a lot of that functionality in the cloud. Not, for example, segmentation as a model in the cloud is not like segmentation as a model on-prem, VRF-like functionality, right? So there's no one-to-one mapping. And so it makes things difficult, it makes things harder to architect and harder to manage segmentation end-to-end. So, but again, there's solutions for that, right? I'm representing an organization that has really elegant solutions for that type of thing. But yeah, absolutely good point. And it's not just the segmentation, there's also the traffic engineering piece, right? You get so much traffic engineering and flexibility, like the whole BGP, path algorithm, path selection algorithm mechanism, or if it's Cisco SD-WAN, you get the OMP path, right? You lose all that as you hit the cloud. Everything is stripped. You got access to the cloud, but all that functionality is bam, done right there. So it's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to mention, regarding this point, if you let's assume that you have this one solution and you extended your SD-WAN, as example, introduce a virtual CPE or whatever at the cloud, and maybe that some of the SD-WAN solution support segmentation using different VPNs and assigning interfaces to different VPNs, so then you can do the segmentation. But I believe it will be somehow complex for this CPE to integrate fully and understand the underlying cloud, like VPCs, like ENIs, like subnets. How this can be achieved? I believe it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, it's the cloud native intelligence that you need to think about, right? That solution was not designed in mind most of the time to even think about the cloud native components of things, right? So you can be orchestrating stuff separately from each other, and sometimes they don't have a one-to-one mapping, and it makes life difficult. You're right, and there's some models that the organization I worked for before that have an overlay model of their SD-WAN in the cloud where you can get that segmentation to a degree. Just let me caveat that, it's to a degree, okay?
I have a question here, if I may. Because now for SD-WAN, we are proposing SD-WAN, but it's mainly like to connect all remote sites to a data center or to the cloud. But here, since we are talking about like co-locations between like data centers, so if we have, back to Zeg's point, like if we have a data center on the cloud and data center on-prem, and even if we have the best of the breed in terms of SD-WAN, still actually we have the limitation of the internet. So it's always best effort. So like even here the SD-WAN, how it could add a value if we don't have a reliable link like MPLS.
So you can still leverage. So there are models that I've deployed for customers prior to coming over to Aviatrix, where you can leverage Direct Connect, SD-WAN on top of Direct Connect Express routes. I actually had a customer that leveraged SD-WAN on top of both for two providers to build semi-multi connectivity. But you don't have to just build it over the internet. You can overlay on top of it.
SD-WAN for me doesn't replace MPLS. You can still have your MPLS connection plus internet plus maybe 4G, and with SD-WAN you can have like single pane of policy control, traffic control between all these different links. So you have your SD-WAN solution and you implement it on top of your MPLS you got from AT&T or from Telstra here in Australia or whatever.
So I'll just add
agree
this,
with
right?
you. So that's back to the point that for remote sites, like to connect remote sites to a data center, that's, I believe, this is the best approach. But the concern between like to connect data center to, let's say, DR and over SD-WAN. So like, Janet, have you seen like similar scenario where they are leveraging for data center interconnection over SD-WAN?
Oh, like a DCI. So it's separate. So cloud aside, you're saying, right? Forget about cloud for a second. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there are some models. If you want to take that back to the SD-WAN world, there's it's already 5:55 a.m. So how long do we have here, Zig? Can we keep going?
We got 35 minutes.
Oh, okay, good. Wait, we have only 5 minutes?
35. 35.
Oh, 35. Okay, good. I was worried. I'm like, man, we're not even close to being on this. Yeah, there's some organizations that have leveraged SD-WAN as a DPI, right? They can build SD-WAN on top of internet or whatever, like VPLS, it doesn't matter. That's the whole point. SD-WAN is agnostic to the underlying transport. But yeah, there's some organizations that leverage SD-WAN for the DCI because of the amount of flexibility they get in traffic control and traffic engineering. But then like my deployments, the majority of them, a customer had already built a nice low latency privatized DCI between all their data centers. So overlaying on top didn't bring them a lot of benefit. It actually added a lot of complexity, and complexity is really something you want to avoid in any networking architecture, right? It's like it's the bane of our existence as network architects is complexity. So really you want to separate complexity from complexity. That's something from the old CCDE guy, Russ White, he used to always say that, you know, separate complexity from complexity wherever you can. And I always avoided putting SD-WAN on top of the DCI because you don't get a lot of benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So before moving to the next slide, I just want to make sure that does anybody have any question regarding this multiple option we talk about for cloud on ramp? Okay, cool. So let's proceed. So we have this. Now let's talk then about multi-cloud. We talk about how to connect to maybe a single cloud service provider, but what shall we achieve when we connect to multiple cloud and how to assure operation and security among these multiple clouds?
Great. Yeah, this is near and dear to my heart. So, you know, I came from an architectural background, and now the organization I work for is architecture heavy, right? We're obsessed with architecture at the organization I work for. And what's interesting is that the cloud industry has had a lack of enterprise architecture for years, right? If you think about what cloud has been for a long time until more recently, probably the last couple of years, it was more of a skunk works, it was more of really fast-paced shadow IT. And if you looked at it from the base of things, there wasn't a lot of enterprise architecture, right? And now we're getting to the point where we have to have that, because those original app guys and the DevOps that they started putting stuff in the cloud, they've proven that apps can and should run in the cloud. And now people are adopting that mentality and that whole mantra, and all this enterprise functionality or enterprise apps are going into the cloud. And now we have to have the same security, the same visibility, the same traffic engineering and service and switching abilities, all the flexibility we had on-prem. We can't just throw it out the window and go to some bunch of basic stuff. No, it's not going to happen. This is why multi-cloud exists, and this is why it's such a industry trend right now, like a real validated industry trend that people are starting to realize, man, we need to figure this out. And so the organization I work for has been focused on architecture for multi-cloud, right? And there's other organizations that they're doing the same thing, like HashiCorp. HashiCorp, I'm sure you guys heard of them, but they have one product called Terraform, which is a multi-cloud automation solution, and they're also thinking architecture, right? Automation side of architecture. And so, initially we were talking about cloud OnRamp models. That's just one piece of the architecture. And that actually has been solved for years. And so that's nothing new. What's new now is enterprise class multi-cloud intra-cloud connectivity. Okay, and so let's kind of break it down. And I think we have enough time to go through this. We should have enough time to go through. So I'll try to go through it quicker. I could take freaking hours to go through all this stuff. I love it so much. But what I want to mention is that you can break down architecture in the cloud just like you can break down architecture on-prem. In the cloud, we have three really defined layers of architecture. You have, from a networking perspective, you have that cloud access layer where all this cloud on-ramp model stuff we talked about is positioned, right? How do we get to the cloud? What's the most efficient way to get to the cloud? What's the most secure way to get to the cloud, right? So that's how do we get users and branches and data centers and colocation facilities? Like that's that layer of things. Then if you step up a layer, there's even a more important piece of a cloud, and that's your transit architecture. That is the heart of the network in the cloud. That's how you get VPCs to talk to each other, VPCs to talk to their VNets across cloud. That's how you talk to partners and vendors and extranets, right? This is key. This is how you insert services and security. That has to be really architected perfectly for you to have a scalable and flexible and agile business model for the cloud. So keep that in mind when you're building your cloud network. What is going to provide you multi-cloud optionality, enterprise class functionality with the cloud? Then above that, you have where your apps reside, your workloads, right? Your VNets have a bunch of workloads. That workload could be like a native VM running in, whatever, Linux or something. It could be a container base. It could be Kubernetes, whatever it is. That's at the app layer, and that layer also has its own networking infrastructure layer, right? You got to figure out, how do I get that to talk to other stuff? How do we figure out the routing in that environment? How do we insert services like inspection or filtering at that layer? And so you can break networking down in the cloud to really these three core components. And across all these layers, you have to really think about, how do I get the visibility and the control and the operations and the day-to functionality for troubleshooting every layer there. And that same thing goes for security. How do we get security across all of them? Mohamed, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm really excited, and I'm just thinking, because as I mentioned, this is not scripted, that a lot of us, maybe because I believe I started working on the cloud 2012 years back, we were all about our mindset. I believe many of us are still stuck in this layer, as you mentioned, how to access the cloud, because it started like platform as a service for us as a base. So for us, the cloud was just a place where we need to connect, and then we manage everything. So we didn't thought about a cloud as part of our enterprise network architect. So I was going actually to ask Zig if you want to comment how to assure that changing this mindset set that the cloud is not only a place where a black box where you just need to worry about how to connect to it, but it's part of your complete infrastructure. How to assure the business there, how to enforce your security, as Bilal mentioned, how to make sure that the application end to end to the user is meeting your requirement and criteria. What do you think, Zig?
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump on my own soapbox again for a minute, right? So this is all about your design mindset. So my opinion, first off, would be is you have to reserve the right to change how you think, right? You have to reserve the right what you think about and what you care about. And Mohamed mentioned that a lot of us are stuck kind of in that access layer. Like, how do we connect? How do we get to cloud? And how do we get from cloud? We, as network engineers, network architects, and network designers, have to transition that thought process. That is a step. We still have to care about that, but we have to add more. We need to care about the cloud transit layer. How are we going to transit from one cloud to another cloud? And then we also need to care about the applications. We don't make a lot of design decisions today based on the applications. We need to make more design decisions based on the applications. The last thing I'll probably say is that all of this goes back to, you have to find the right wording to justify this to the business leaders, right? And you have to make it so it makes sense to them. They're not going to understand VPC or VNets or VCNs or whatever technology. They could care less about the technology. I'll use a simple example, right? They don't care if you're running EIGRP or OSPF or ISIS. They don't care if you're running BGP. They want to know what they're going to get out of it. So as long as you vocalize that to them in the right way, what the value they're going to get, you're going to be successful.
100%. So back to you, Dana. So let's say we want to tackle it, as we know from as a good CCDE or architect, top down. So let's say we have these three different clouds. I have some workload in AWS, other in Azure, a third piece in Google and Oracle, whatever. So how to make sure this model is working from operation security perspective?
Yeah, from operations perspective, okay, that's a different question than I thought we were going. But okay, I would say top down.
Yeah.
If I approach this top down, usually you want to start at, especially, first of all, you mentioned the requirements. We mentioned it again. You said you have applications in different clouds, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so top down would be from the transit layer, right? Because that's going to provide the connectivity to on-prem to those different apps, and from cloud to cloud, region to region, whatever it might be. So that's your top layer that I would say you start with. That's what most organizations I work with start at that layer, right? Making the right decisions for the transit. And then at that point, it's up to you where you want to go. Right? I think it's you can start from the app at that point, or you can start from the ingress piece. But I would say, especially, it depends on your traffic flow model as well, right? If it's a lot of cloud-to-cloud traffic flow models, there's not a lot of importance that's placed on the access layer, the access side of things. It's more so transit and app side, right? It all depends on what your organization's traffic flow models look like, and every organization is different, right? There's some of them are very legacy and still have a lot of on-prem connectivity into the cloud. Others are just super cloud focused. They're just full cloud. They're born in the cloud and they're not going anywhere away from the cloud, right? They're never going to build a data center. They're never going to build a branch. So there's really no need to think about how they can connect those users, right?
So it's like a greenfield situation, right? If you're just building out in the cloud from the get-go. Like I would add one thing that you mentioned. I just make a comment on it, right? Visibility and knowing your traffic flow, your traffic patterns, your user flows. And if you have a legacy on-prem, legacy is the wrong word, but let's just say you have a legacy on-prem data center and access locations and branches. If you don't know your data flows today, that's something you need to start figuring out. In tandem, in parallel to all this, right? Because you just start identifying what users are accessing what and why, right?
This makes your migration to the cloud easier if you know your flows.
Exactly.
You know
application migration too, right? What are the applications using, right? Do you even know what your applications are using? I talk about this with my customers all the time. They have 100 or 1,000 applications, and no one knows what their applications are actually doing.
100%.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was going to mention something else, but I forgot it now. It's gone. It's gone.
No worries.
It'll come back. Maybe it wasn't that important. Yeah. So we layer on these other. Oh, I remember what it is. Yeah. So I was going to say that yeah. You mentioned greenfield versus brownfield. We definitely see both out there, right? And actually, what's interesting is that the greenfield is more than you think now, because all these startups that are being built, they're not building data centers or anything. They're fully cloud. Like at my organization, we work with a lot of neobanks. I don't know if you've heard of this terminology, but these are the next generation banking experience. It's all app based. There's no branch or anybody to go to. Right? It's fully internet based, and they're heavy analytics engines. And so, yeah, that's full cloud, and that's almost always multi-cloud, the ones that we work with. Banks.
So I want to make one more point, right? On kind of the last slide and this slide together-ish. We're not going to go through all these things on the slide, right? But
yeah,
like on the applications, right? One of the biggest things, you're going to cloud because you're putting applications and services in cloud, right? And I say services because it may not be an application, it might be a container, you might be doing some containerization or whatever. You might be doing in the grand scheme of things. App re-rationalization is critical. You have to truly understand your application. Not all applications can be moved to cloud the way they are, right? They were built 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever time frame, and they just won't function in cloud the way that they function on-prem. So that's another thing to keep in mind as you migrate to cloud, or this is more migrating brownfield, right, versus than greenfield. But as you migrate your applications and your workloads and your services to cloud, you have to do an assessment of those applications and say, hey, is this capable of working in the cloud? I've been in multiple situations where customers just moved all their apps to cloud and they broke their business. And they broke their business hard. I mean, for months. And some companies went out of business because of it. So this is one of those gotchas that you really should know about.
100%. I totally agree with you, Zig. I remember even we faced similar situation here, that companies migrate some of the application to the cloud and then they fail to establish the connectivity between on-prem and cloud. And also when you start identifying the migration to the cloud per application, maybe some application you just re-hosted, some application you need to re-platform it, maybe you can use a new way to restructure your application using maybe microservers or serverless even. So a lot of things as I mentioned, we have to start changing our mindset and try to adopt cloud native, try to adopt decoupling even inside the application. But I believe Dana, he prepared a very nice use case. I don't want to, I don't have the time to go through it. So let's jump to the next one.
Yeah, this is more so. This is the multi-cloud thought process from an architecture perspective. This is why we have this slide. And let's click the button one more time. and it should bring up, oh, there we go. Okay, so, you know, I mentioned earlier that as we start to move our applications, or we start to re-platform, like we were mentioning earlier, or we actually build native apps in the cloud, and enterprise IT is getting involved because this is now a real production, and we need the scale and the visibility. So that you have to start thinking about, okay, well, where do we need to augment cloud networking where today it falls short, right? So because you have to think about this in a realistic way here. You know, cloud networking is still in its infancy. It's just from the grand scheme of things, or if you think of the big picture, we're super infancy right now. Cloud is going to be our next 15 years, I bet. Like I just spent the first 15 years of my career, or 13 years of the career in on-prem networking. I swear I'm spending the next 13 to 15 in cloud now, because we're just from the rapid progression and the rapid changes in the cloud that's happening. I can tell you that, you know, it's going to be a long journey and there's a lot to do in the cloud. And so right now we're still in our infancy, and so as you start to move there, you're going to realize that there's enterprise requirements that are not able to be met by any cloud, right? And this is why organizations that I work for exist, and we're there to augment and add to the network to make it enterprise class in the cloud. So you can still leverage the same visibility that you had previously. You can still leverage the same amount of control and functionality, right? So I won't go through all these things here because you guys can read them on your own, but you can kind of pinpoint some of the really important ones, right? Like service insertion of security. You know, if your enterprise IT is getting involved, your enterprise security team is also getting involved, right? And so now you have a requirement to get enterprise security requirements met in the cloud, and that is going to likely require something more application centric than what's offered by a basic cloud service provider. So maybe you need a virtualized Fortinet or Checkpoint or Palo Alto or any other next NGFW that's been platformed for the cloud now. You might need to insert that into the path of traffic. How do you do that gracefully? And how do you do that across all the clouds seamlessly, easily? How are you able to stamp out the same service insertion architecture across your clouds without having to rethink it all every single time? And that goes for automation as well, right? How do you make automation like a one API across all clouds? That's a big thing going forward. Same thing with segmentation. Segmentation doesn't go away. I get customers asking me, how do you handle segmentation in the cloud? And there's really no native way to do it nicely, especially in multi-cloud. So you got to think about, well, how do we have this unified segmentation? And that then brings us to what? A unified data plane. How do we have a normalized unified data plane across all of them? And like, I'm giving you hints here for you guys to go and do your own research, but I want you to think through, maybe we can ask customers, some of the people on the call here, how do we accomplish this type of thing? What's probably the most realistic way to do it?
Yeah, I was actually going to, while people are thinking, I was going to try to be like the devil advocate, or try to do it the old way. Let's assume this is maybe 5 years back or so. I have some workload in the 3 or 4 clouds, and maybe I want to have, as you mentioned, more control. So I will decide, maybe let me put a virtual router on each of these clouds, and let me connect also this virtual router to my branches here and my data center, and I can build my own overlay system. And then I start, like I'm building my cloud, my transport network on top of the cloud. Then I need to run my IGP protocol, need to take care about advertisement and all. So it can be done the old way, but it will be very hectic, very operational, extensive, and maybe some feature you cannot match it.
You're
extremely complex.
Yeah, exactly. You're going on the right path. There's a modern way to do that now, and we've been controller. If this is a word, controllerizing. I don't know if that's a word, but we've been software defining networking in all these different components of networking. Right? We have it now in data center networking. We have it in WAN networking. We have it in LAN campus switching. We have it in wireless networking now. So that SDN model, the controller-based model, is applicable to the cloud as well, right? It's a next generation controller-based separation, right? You know, like we've all heard this before. This is now relevant to the cloud. So yeah, definitely think that through. It's a software-defined mechanism to bring enterprise class routing, enterprise class visibility, enterprise class security into the cloud by running on top of the native services. Those are your hints, right? We won't go too much more in depth into that. You can kind of go do your research on it, but yeah, you'll find everything.
I'll just add this one thing, right? I mean, I think what most companies and businesses are looking for are that kind of single pane. Everyone wants that single pane of glass, right? But really, that single system that can instantiate a true end-to-end segmentation policy, security policy, a true end-to-end automated workflow, and it manages all these different SDN and different fabrics in these places in the network. So you got, a software-defined cloud, software-defined data center, software-defined WAN, software-defined LAN, and then you got security across all that. I'm spitballing, right? I don't necessarily think anything exists today. Maybe it does, but if you could find a solution that kind of unifies all of that, right, and makes it one true unified kind of fabric across these places in the network, and it gives you security, gives you reporting, gives you quality of user experience, all those things that we care about.
That's nirvana. I would say that's a nirvana, right? That's that would be amazing. But yeah, you're right. Today there's solutions. They're separated solutions, right? But they're solutions that definitely complement each other, and that you can have beautiful interoperability still, right? Yeah. If you architected it correctly and you work with the right organizations, you can definitely get this to work very nicely. We do this all the time, right? This is I love that. That's a really good point, though. It'd be cool to have that something.
Yeah. So I did this intentionally. I tried to draw the old way of doing stuff. So similarly, I'm comparing how we used to do WAN for the last 50, 30 years, how we used to do WAN, and how SD-WAN is moving even inside the transport. That we are working on the transport is being changed. Next generation transport, segment routing, WAN SDN, which is completely different than SD-WAN, how to also implement the intelligent and policy control and enforcement for your infrastructure as a service provider, not on the edge. So, Dan, if you want to comment before going to the use case.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just say one more thing on this. You have to be really careful. Let's go back to the architectural mindset. You have to be really careful with this as well, because you can inject a bunch of complexity, and your life is going to be hell, right? So you have to figure out, how can I find this beautiful balance between complexity and functionality for whatever service that you're trying to build out in the cloud, whatever you're trying to overlay, whatever you're trying to do in the cloud from a networking perspective. You have to make sure that simplicity still exists. Right? The whole point, well, I would say the whole point, one of the major points of going to the cloud for a lot of organizations was the simplicity and the easily consumable model, right? It's easy to consume and spin up and spin down, right? And provision and deprovision, whatever. That you don't want to lose that, but you also don't want to compromise on functionality, enterprise class functionality, right? So this is a balance you have to play with and figure out.
Yeah. Thank you, Dania. Really important point. So the remaining time, let's go through the use case. Hopefully we can cover most of it. Okay, so let's tell us, Dana, what was the requirement from this medical data analytics company and how we can achieve it with multi-cloud.
Yeah, so I mean, just to preface this, and to be fair, I work for an organization that's focused on multi-cloud connectivity and the unification of clouds and single API and one network architecture across clouds. Like, that's our mantra, right? And so the solution that was used here was, of course, the solution of the organization that I work for, right? So just keep that in mind. I mean, it's a beautiful solution, what we've done for these customers, but this is a good example. This is a real world one that was from a colleague of mine that I know worked on it. So basically, a medical data analytics company has these real world use cases, right? This is a new gen data analytics company, not an old gen. I mean, it's semi-gen, I guess. It's not like fully native in the cloud, but they have these requirements. They had a requirement for multi-cloud. So it was 2 or 3 clouds. I can't remember now. We'll see here in the deck here. I think it was 3 clouds.
3 clouds.
And then, yeah. And then they needed regional data center access. They still had one or a couple data centers in the environment that needed to be able to onboard into the cloud. They required PCI compliance. This is an analytics company, so there's definitely going to be something to do with finances there, but also likely HIPAA in here. If there's some analytics data coming from their, whatever doctors or whatever, I don't know what the exact data look like, but probably there's something there that's HIPAA requirement, right? So there's going to be some pieces that you need to think about. They had already invested in SD-WAN, some connectivity to maybe some clinics. And so that was something they wanted to make sure they could retain this investment and its control and visibility as they went to the cloud. They had a lot of customers and they had a lot of vendors at the same time. So they got to figure out what's the model now to connect to them. And then all the remote users. And this is especially true with COVID now, as we all work from home. I work from my kitchen. We would all work from wherever. I have my office set up here. It's easy access to beer, so I can just open the fridge and I have whatever I want. But basically,
I'm doing it wrong then, dude. I'm doing it totally wrong. I have an office built. I should be in the kitchen.
Yeah, you just open the door and you get your whole everything. But yeah, and so user access was a key, and then of course security, right? The native security functionality, which is almost non-existent in the cloud, is not nearly enough for most organizations as they move enterprise workloads. The workload, you have to think about this. These are the workloads that pay your paycheck, right? Like give you your paycheck. You're not playing around with this. So this is no joke. You need to make sure your true enterprise class functionality is available there. And then at the end, you can build a beautiful network all day long through whatever solution or whatever automation you want. But if you can't operate this efficiently and effectively, you're essentially walking into the cloud with your hands tied and a blindfold on and working with a black box. This is not what you want from an enterprise class functionality. And so these are the key components. Let's go to the next one.
What's happening?
Oh, there's another one there. And we'll go back, integration with what?
With existing cloud.
Oh, yeah. Cloud automation. So we'll talk about that here. I mentioned it several times already. HashiCorp, Terraform. If you don't know what that is, start learning that. Go learn that. If you want to really be cloud powerful engineer, whatever you want to call it, go learn Terraform. It's super important. But anyways, you can start to map out all the requirements on the multi-cloud network architecture I showed you earlier. Right? It makes it nice and easy to just pop out. Okay, it's going to go here. That's where this is. This is where that's built out. Now you have this architectural mindset as you design these requirements for your customer, or design the solution for these requirements for your customer. All right, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So how did my organization handle this? Sorry, do you want to say something, Zig?
So yeah, can I ask a question, please? Just if you quick one regarding point 8 in the previous slide regarding the third-party firewalls. So actually, this is interesting to have like a firewall across multi-clouds and how you manage the traffic, especially for east-west traffic.
Mm.
I think Dana might have had an issue. He might have got disconnected.
We lost Dan, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just give him a minute, see if he comes back.
It seems someone feel jealous, so this is why he
Hear me
missed
now?
the connection. He's working from kitchen.
I think he might be coming back. Give him a minute here.
He's back.
I'm back.
You back with us?
He's back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Dana. Go ahead. Have you the question or?
Yeah, I heard the question. Actually, right after the question ended.
Yeah. Oops, it's happening again.
This is our lives now, right? Everything's remote. Everything's required on internet connectivity, right? So it's out of our control.
So not sure if those firewalls are for east-west traffic or the north-south traffic actually.
Yeah.
All right, take 3, Dana. You're back?
I'm back.
Yeah, can you hear
I don't know what's going on. My internet connectivity is going up and down. I don't know what's happening here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let's try this again, real quick, to answer the question. Yeah, this is difficult, right? Because you don't share state across these third-party firewalls, right? So you have isolated firewall pods that you ingress and egress out of based on a policy. So you should have a solution that has intelligent policy to force traffic in a regional perspective through these regional firewall pods, right? So if you need to go cross-cloud, that function, that solution you have that can orchestrate the routing should be intelligent enough to send it through one firewall domain first, hop it through your interconnectivity model to another firewall domain, up to the app, and keep that traffic symmetric and optimal. You need to have a solution for that. Natively, that's difficult as hell, right? You need to manually configure that. Yeah,
that's true.
So I would just add this then to that. I would just say, like, as organizations migrate to kind of zero trust, and you start understanding your data flows and what applications are supposed to be doing, that's going to be a lot easier to implement. The analytics engine, the enforcement policy, it's going to be a lot easier to implement. Today, it's just hard because I think a lot of that's unknown, and you're manually configuring the firewalls. Even if you have a controller or a manager controlling, hundreds of firewalls, you're still going in and making changes manually, right? And not, you have to know what you need to block or allow, type of thing.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good, that's a really thoughtful question. I like that one. Okay.
Yeah, because I was going to comment, for example, if we will have our firewall insertion data, and then we have for each of these cloud providers, they have their own version of, as example, firewall, DDoS protection, WAF, or whatever. So do you have any integration with the firewall insertion from your solution and each of the cloud provider native firewall or WAF?
Yeah, that's totally important. So, okay, I'll answer the question in two pieces. Having a solution that orchestrates, not just orchestrates, but is the network platform for the cloud. Having it be cloud native, meaning it has an understanding of the cloud APIs and the cloud native constructs, is important because you may need to leverage that in unison with whatever you're doing from an augmentation perspective, right? So your controller should be intelligent enough to be able to handle the provisioning and programming of these other components. So yes, absolutely, our solution is cloud native, totally understands cloud native constructs and can configure, can manage, can manipulate and handle the life cycle of them. But take that a step further, it can even, I mean, this is not, I don't want to just make this a sales pitch, but what's beautiful about this controller is that it speaks third-party APIs as well, right? So it will spin up third-party APIs. It'll configure them. It'll push config to them. It'll push routes to them depending on the route that it learned that it knows needs to be programmed to have east-west, north-south connectivity. It'll handle the life cycle of them. It'll spin them up, spin them down, put more into path of traffic, whatever it is to scale out to meet those requirements. The controller architecture that Aviatrix has designed will handle that for you. It's key to our solution. We call that the FireNet component, right? So you can spin up FireNet in the click of a button or a single Terraform module. Spin up. I have a demo on this on my YouTube channel. Quick pitch. You want to know more about this product? Dana at Aviatrix on YouTube. Check that out. Okay, I have a whole series. But yeah, the whole model of insertion of firewalls has been dealt with. We figured that out.
Brilliant. What I also like about the architecture that you have, like as example, like you are building your transport layer here in the middle, with all these firewalls and routers communicating to each other, and you have your presence in each of these virtual data centers. So you can impose and enforce your traffic pattern because you have like full visibility. And you mentioned you have cloud native. You understand inside the VPC, you understand the different subnet, you understand the different security group, and you can communicate with them.
Absolutely. So our particular solution understands every single networking construct across all clouds. So it doesn't matter if it's the routing table, the attachment functionality for TGW or whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. It supports. It understands all that and catalogs it all, right? And so that definitely that's taken into consideration as the
And I need to mute somebody else. Done. Sorry for that.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Good question. Let's move on so we don't run out of time here.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you if you can take us about each of these requirements and how to achieve it. I think we covered this one. Yeah.
Yeah, how to meet the requirements. That's your multi-cloud segmented data plane. So when you build a normalized data plane, you can now easily shift traffic left, right, east, west, north, south, to the internet through any cloud by using the controller-based model. We have the unified controller, but we also have a normalized data plane. You don't have to worry about how you do routing in one cloud versus another, and what are the caveats and benefits and whatever across different clouds, forget it. We've augmented that, we've gone on top of it, we've added all our functionality with a normalized software-defined model, right? So in this case, yeah, we built this multi-cloud segmented data plane. We support segmentation initially, right? VRF like segmentation you used to use. Okay, so how do we meet these other requirements? Well, you know, it's the same thing, right? We can orchestrate and automate the connectivity to on-prem via IPsec with BGP on top, right? Or SD-WAN ingress, or on-prem access through user access through SSL VPN, right? Or maybe you want to leverage a cloud interconnect. That model has to be thought through by whatever solution you're picking, so that it's not so manual, that you can orchestrate, automate it, and have the visibility into the performance of it and whatnot. Right? So that's solved through the platform, hopefully that you pick, but Aviatrix of course solves quite elegantly, right? We actually, Mohamed, you actually kind of preempted this one. I talked about the integration, insertion, and firewalls. That's solved through orchestration model, right? It's handled here for you, and of course the controller should understand modular-based firewall insertion. It's not all just one big firewall. You know, you have to understand that different traffic flows are going to go through different firewalls, likely, or possibly. You might have one firewall cluster for east, west, north, south, another firewall cluster for internet egress. Each solution should be intelligent enough to be able to shift traffic to the right firewall cluster depending on what that traffic flow looks like. Right, that's key. That's important. So you have that flexibility of policy. All right, let's go to the next one.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, sorry guys, if you don't mind, we'll go maybe 10 minutes above the schedule, but feel free if you have to drop. Thank you for joining us. And if you have any question, put it on the chat and we will make sure to have at least 5 minutes at the end for your questions. Yeah, back to you, Dana.
Yep, let's go to the next one. Slide there. Okay. This is an interesting one because as you on-ramp the cloud, or as you start to put more into the cloud, you may even put your DMZ or your vendor extranet connectivity in the cloud as well, because it makes sense, right? It's highly available. Your customers might be all around the world. They can connect to the most optimal ingress and terminate there and get access to the closest app. That's a model that's being consumed more and more. And so we need to think about what are some of the things you could run into. One thing we run into a lot is overlapping CIDR problems, whether it's an acquisition connectivity model or it's a customer connectivity or a vendor. You know, everybody uses RFC 1918, right? So nobody's coordinating with each other what CIDRs are being used. And so you need that private-to-private connectivity, and now what happens? How do you handle that, right? Natively, you can, because there's no real good NAT functionality. But when you have a true enterprise class architecture and data plane, you can start to implement NAT. Really a nice NAT, like VNAT, so SNAT, policy-based NAT, where you need it in the most strategic places in the network to get that connectivity to work. That's a really common use case. So like we come across that all the time with our customers.
Brilliant.
Yeah, let's go to the next one here. All right, and then there's two pieces here that we could talk about. I'm not sure why they're on the same slide, but they are. But the Terraform automation piece. So the company I work for, Aviatrix, we're an official Terraform provider. We build our own Terraform resources and modules, and we're very closely partnered with HashiCorp. And so you can now automate against a controller with a single Terraform provider. You can go look up what that is. I'm not going to go into depth what that is right now. But then you will handle all the automation underneath that, right? So it's trickle-down effect. All you're doing is terraforming against a controller, a unified language. And after that, we're handling the automation in AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI, Palo Alto, Fortinet. We handle all the vendors, whether it's native or not native, third party or not third party, we'll handle all the automation for you there, right? So it's really a brilliant model because now it simplifies your automation, your CI/CD pipeline. It's so much easier. But that's anything to say there before we move on to the.
I was going to say, actually, I watched the demo you prepared, Dana, and I got really excited that when I saw this diagram, that it's not showing only the transport, as I mentioned, it shows inside your VPC, it shows you the resources, and I like the feature that you can tag some of the resources that you want to monitor and only show this one that you tag, so it gives you a lot of flexibility and control.
Yeah, go if you want to see what. Go ahead, Zeke.
Yeah, Dana, real quick, there's a question in chat, and it's an Aviatrix question, so I just want to make sure you can answer it. Does Aviatrix only fits in multi-cloud environment, or I'm assuming the question's really more about could it be just in a single cloud environment?
Absolutely. I mean, we all know that. So I think there's two parts to that question. Can it only be multi-cloud? No. I mean, most people start in single cloud. And so our solution's benefits are just as relevant to single cloud than it is to multi-cloud. Because single cloud, you can think, is also complex. You don't just have a single cloud. You have a single cloud with multiple regions and multiple accounts. Some of our customers have like 4 regions and hundreds of accounts they have to manage. That's hundreds of networking components that just scales out, right? So to manage that manually, natively, is good luck. You have like a team of engineers doing that, and you're spending your life managing that. No, that's not what we're here to do, right? We want to be architects. And so having a platform that manages, a unified platform that manages a single cloud is just as important as a platform that can manage that across multiple clouds. So absolutely, single cloud, totally beneficial. Absolutely. The other thing is it Atrix on-prem? That's another question I get a lot. Is any automation, any orchestration, whatever on-prem? There's one small piece of the solution that's on-prem, and we have our own gateway that, you know, we have all these virtualized gateways, right, in the cloud, but we can actually take that gateway and it can be put on-prem, you know, on a server, but we actually sell that platform. So it's basically a high throughput router. It's a Linux server that acting as a high throughput on-prem router gives you access to the cloud. So it's encrypted high throughput access via over the internet, or you can, what I was talking about earlier is that one of the drawbacks of Direct Connect or Express Route and some of these things is that you don't have control over the IPsec or any of the encryption on top of that, but if you can do overlays on top, and so Aviatrix supports an overlay router that will then build an IPsec, well, it actually builds many IPsec tunnels and equal cost multicast and load shares across all these IPsec tunnels across Direct Connection. Now you have 10 gig native encrypted throughput across that privatized connection. So that's the only on-prem connection model that we have.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll stop asking the question. Ahmad, just let us know if that didn't or did answer your question in chat, and then we'll answer the rest of the questions at the end. Sorry.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, the last piece of this, I think we're at the last piece. Oh, let's go back one. Go back one. Go back one more.
Well, it's not going back.
I think there's a little bit of a lag on my screen. Yeah, this one. Yeah, stay there. So the last piece of it that's just totally missing from cloud today is visibility and troubleshooting tools from a networking perspective, from an enterprise class perspective, okay? So that's just not been a focus, but it has to be a focus. If you guys are gonna be effective day 2 in the cloud and you don't wanna embarrass yourself that you can't figure out what a problem is from a network connectivity perspective is, you need functionality that gives you in-depth visibility. It gives you packet capture where you need the packet capture. It gives you ping and trace route where you need to ping and trace route. And gives you visual troubleshooting, visual dynamic topologies, flow analytics, security correlation tools, geolocation functionality, health of the network. You need all of that on the cloud, just like you had on-prem. I mean, some of the stuff is actually, you don't even have on-prem like as easily. Like, for example, this dynamic multi-cloud topology that we have, it's brilliant. Like, as you're building out your cloud and scaling out, this is automatically updating and telling you exactly what your cloud network connectivity model looks like. It maps it out immediately, and everything in there is interactive. And you can go and click and get detailed information from every cloud, from every construct, from every instance in the cloud. You can set up traffic. Sorry, go ahead, Zig.
No, I was just going to comment, man. It sounds really interesting because I know, like, in my experience, like trying to connect to cloud, you had no visibility, right? I mean, like doing IPsec tunnels and trying to do BGP neighborships, like they stripped everything out. So you couldn't do any type of flexibility or policy control. You couldn't do active-active locations. It was really almost like you were handcuffed. So having a newer way of doing it where you can do all those things, all that flexibility, all those controls, that's really a huge benefit these days.
Yeah, a platform like this, thank you, Zing, it's very true. A platform like this is giving control of the network back to the network, into the IT, into the network individuals, right? So we didn't have control of the cloud, and we're getting forced into having control of the cloud. But if we're going to get control of it, we need the visibility that we're used to having, right? And so I recommend, if you want to learn more about this product, it's called Aviatrix Copilot. It's a component of the Aviatrix controller architecture. Just search Aviatrix Copilot on YouTube, and my videos will come up. And I have in-depth demos. It's mind-blowing. And actually, we just released today the newest version of it, and it has this sweet functionality. I'm just going to mention real quick because it blew my mind. It's global route table visibility. So as you build out your VPCs and your VNets and your transit networks and your whatever overlays you're building, you don't have a good way to visualize routing. So now what we have is this global route table visibility where it'll pull and articulate all the routes and all the paths in the network and the active paths, the inactive paths, right? And it'll pinpoint those paths on the dynamic topology for you. It's brilliant. You can do regular expression searching through different CIDRs and prefixes, and it's just super cool. So I'm going to do a new demo on that one here soon.
Hey Dana, so I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm thinking this is a good idea, so just let me know if it's not. There's a lot of questions in chat about Aviatrix, what it can do, what it can't do, what you get out of it, all these things, right? People have a ton of questions. So what I'm thinking we do, since we're running out of time, right, and we want to get to the end of this and everything, do you mind if when we are done and we send out the replay, I'm going to email everyone that's on the list the replay. Can we put your contact information, your YouTube channel, whatever you want to share? We can send it to them so they can find these answers for themselves.
Absolutely. We're a team of people here that we're worldwide and that we're ready to help everybody with cloud and whatever it might be, right? So definitely throw my YouTube in there. And like, honestly, you can learn the entire Aviatrix platform by watching my YouTube channel. I have, at this point, like 22 videos. It's a series. It's called the Multi-Cloud Network Architecture series. You can start from episode 1, go to episode 22, and you're going to be a multi-cloud expert from the Aviatrix perspective. But I go into depth. They're really fun videos, so go watch those. If you want to do some self-paced learning, aviatrix.com/ACE, ACE. As Aviatrix Certified Engineer. It's for free right now. You can go through the entire curriculum and learn the platform and learn about multi-cloud networking for free right now, right? And the other thing is aviatrix.com/events. Very basic. We'll throw all that in there, and you can go learn. Every week we have seminars and webinars, and you can go come if you're not sick of listening to me talk now. You can hear me every day.
And we can have also another session talk more about different solutions. But I just want to highlight, if you don't mind, Dana, that we're trying to be as vendor agnostic as possible in this series of webinar. Dana is talking specifically about Aviatrix because the use case was using Aviatrix tools. But as we mentioned, we talked about WAN and SD-WAN, and you go and do the research, you can find a lot of SD-WAN solution. The key message here that you have the old way to build the multi-cloud and the new way to build the multi-cloud. If we're taking the analogy of building your WAN 30 years ago and building your WAN using the SD-WAN 5 or 6 years ago. Similarly, if you want to build your multi-cloud the old way, a lot of headache and OpEx, or you can use some of the new tools. There's many, just as I mentioned, the Aviatrix is one example, and we're trying to be as vendor agnostic as possible. But thank you, Dana, for that. And I'm not sure if you have some time to answer the questions, or if
I have time. It's 6:43 a.m. in the morning here in the west coast of the U.S. So I have time. I got nothing else to do till 9.
Sure. So let's say take maybe 5 more minutes, answer a couple of the questions. Maybe Zig was taking care of the chat. If you can answer maybe 3-4 questions, and we will try to have another session, the 3 of us, and to carry on this journey.
Yeah, that's all great points. So I'll just jump into the questions here. Vipul, I'm sorry if I'm getting your name wrong there. Are we using Aviatrix for multi-cloud environment? I mean, I think that's a yes. So if that's not answering your question, just let us know. And Dana, let me know if that's not right. That's
the whole point of this. That's the whole discussion.
Bellala, is Aviatrix agnostic from network standpoint? Any interoperability matrix?
Yeah, I would say it's vendor agnostic from the CSP perspective, meaning this is an overlay or controller-based overlay solution that can run across any CSP and orchestrate any CSP. It's like really, obviously the any CSP, the major ones, right? So OCI, GCP, AWS and Azure in any region, in any account, any subscription. So totally that's from that perspective. From another, I'm not sure how other to answer that because we're not like on-prem, so we wouldn't really do much with on-prem. If you're going to talk about integration with SD-WAN, yeah, we're agnostic there. When I joined Aviatrix, the first thing I did was validate the vendor interoperability between Aviatrix and every SD-WAN vendor out there. Right? So I tested Versa, VeloCloud, Silver Peak, Meraki, Cisco. There's another one in there. I can't remember, but I tested all of those, and they all vendor not. They all work perfectly because when we connect to a third-party solution like that, we're using standards-based IPsec with BGP. So you get definitely this vendor agnostic there.
The next question is how is an instance of AWS? Sorry, I was trying to reword this. How can you communicate between an instance of AWS and an instance of Azure in a multi-cloud environment in Aviatrix? Do we need to set up a route?
Can you ask the question one more time? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
Yeah, no worries. I'm paraphrasing, right? So you have two instances. You have an AWS instance, and you have, let's say, an Azure instance, right? You have this multi-cloud environment. Inside Aviatrix, how do we communicate between the two instances? Do we set up a route?
Okay, that's a good question. So it's a question because it leads me into talking about how brilliant this is. So yeah, so because it's a controller-based model, the controller is monitoring any CIDR that's under its control. So if you have an instance in AWS and an instance in Azure, those are part of specific CIDRs, right? So the controller already knows of those CIDRs. If your policy has said that yes, they can talk to each other if they're in the same segment and you want to allow them to talk to each other from a security perspective, it then orchestrates and programs the routes in the respective native routing tables to point to the Aviatrix overlay infrastructure. And Aviatrix overlay infrastructure, all the data plane components, all the routers are programmed as well by the controller. So there's a state synchronization of routing, right? So it'll control the source destination routes bidirectionally. It handles the route propagation end to end for you. It's dynamic. If a path goes down and there's an alternate path to get there, it'll reprogram, recalculate, report. It's like a dynamic routing protocol for the cloud, but software defined. So absolutely, yes, a connectivity model is built up for you. And so that routing is the control plane piece, right? That's definitely orchestrated and handled for you. But there's also the data plane piece, right? So you got to actually build the overlay. So we also build automatically a full mesh, high throughput, IPsec encrypted infrastructure, multi-cloud to multi-cloud, or sorry, cloud to cloud, to build that multi-cloud normalized data plane.
Awesome. We have one last question, and it's more business focused than Aviatrix. So I think this is a good one for all three of us. From a business perspective, can you define multi-cloud, considering AWS commands 90% of the cloud market, Azure 5%, Google another 5%? How practical is multi-cloud? And then he's asking from the CCDE exam preparation perspective.
So I can't answer CCDE side of things. I can tell you from the real world perspective. CCDE, I did that like 7 years ago, right? And there was not even there was one, I think at that point, there was one cloud scenario or a couple of questions on cloud because it was like early, right? And I don't remember. So, but from the perspective of the real world, those numbers, I don't know where those numbers are coming from.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe the latest I saw, Dana, was maybe Azure is 40 plus. Azure is catching up. Azure is now almost 20% and Google 8 to 9%. So I believe this number is changing a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With every quarter, those numbers are shifting, and I think it's normalizing. It's no longer these extremes because the customers that we see are using multiple, right? And it's not going to be 50-50, right? You might have a good amount of workloads in one, and maybe some other some others, a couple more in another cloud. But eventually that shifts, right? It all depends on the business requirements, and so it doesn't. I would say my answer to that, it doesn't matter because in the end you need to lay the track for the multi-cloud train because it's coming. And you have to have that ready, otherwise your train's going to be ready.
So I think the actual kind of important part of that question is from a business perspective, can you define multi-cloud? Like, I think the person is looking for like, how do you identify multi-cloud from a requirements capability standpoint?
Yeah.
That was so that if you go back to all the first set of slides, I'm not sure if this individual joined late, but that was discussed. That was the whole discussion.
This was the second slide, I believe, when we talk about business led. If you have acquisition or maybe some application like, I believe Google, they're really good when it comes to machine learning and API and AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you join late, go watch the preview or the review of this and that slide. We go into that depth on that.
Yeah.
And then I got another question. What impact does a multi-cloud approach have on data security?
On data security. What impact does it have on data security? Let me think about that one.
I mean, data. I think it's all about your data. You have to have data security in your plan, right? And I would say you have to secure your data at rest, no matter where it is, if that's on-prem or in the cloud. And then you also have to secure data in transit. So
That's right.
I don't think much changes from your policy perspective. It's just how you do it would change.
Yeah, I would say those requirements still exist from a data security perspective. You have to think about it. You know, all these clouds do data security differently. In the cloud, some have native data security services, others don't. Some are mature, some are immature. But I think what a lot of our organizations that I work with is a unified data security model. So if they're using Palo Alto for data security, like they want to use it across all clouds. They want to have the flexibility to insert that in the same way. They want to be able to stamp out a validated data security model from cloud to cloud, region to region, without having to rethink it all, right? So that's the way we approach that. I hope that answers the question, but that's the best I can do.
I was going to add, Dana, maybe if we consider from governance and standard, as you mentioned, each of the cloud providers are different. So some of them, maybe they have 90 security compliance, like for example, PCI, HIPAA, and SOX, and so on. Maybe other cloud provider doesn't have the regulation or standard that you're looking for. So maybe this will affect your decision or affect which cloud provider you should host the service to meet the security perspective.
I think it's a valid point. Yeah, Zig, do you have something to say about that?
No, because I was typing a response in chat.
All right,
I'll be honest. I'm not going to fake it, guys. I totally wasn't listening for a second.
That's cool. That's cool.
I believe.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions, you guys. So I was just responding to someone else in chat. I think that's all the questions. So I turned over to you, Mohamed, to I guess wrap it up.
No. Thank you again, everyone. It was really exciting, and I believe it's improving and getting more interactive each time. So thanks again. Thank you, Dana. It was a pleasure having you, and I believe you enriched the session and brought a lot of experience for SD-WAN, for multi-cloud, and
my pleasure.
And thank you, Zig. You're my co-host on this, so if you want to end it today.
Well, I appreciate you guys. It's been fun. We're looking forward to this. Let us know if you want to hear anything else. You know, we're still focusing on cloud and private cloud and multi-cloud. I'd be, reach out. Let us know if there's something else you want us to focus on. Right? We got 3 CCDEs here, and we should have 4. Joel's on the call, so there's 4 CCDEs. And if you have any follow-on questions, just send them out to us, and we'll answer them for you.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.